It was a bright and busy afternoon, and the mall was buzzing with people. Families walked together, friends laughed as they carried shopping bags, and the sound of footsteps on the polished floor echoed through the large space. In the middle of it all, a woman who was heavily pregnant moved carefully, her hand gently resting on her belly. She was wearing a simple, comfortable dress and looked a little tired, but there was a soft glow on her face that came from the joy of expecting a child. She was trying to enjoy the day, browsing through the shops and picking up a few items for her home. The crowd was thick. People were moving quickly from one shop to another. The pregnant woman tried to navigate through the shoppers slowly, making sure she didn't bump into anyone. At the same time, there was another woman in the mall, walking with confidence and an air of pride. She was dressed in fashionable clothes, and her heels clicked loudly on the floor as she moved. She wasn't paying attention to anyone around her, and there was a sharpness in her gaze, a kind of impatience that made it clear she believed the world should move for her. The two women's paths crossed near a display of handbags. The pregnant woman stepped aside to get a better look at a bag. But in the process, her shoulder brushed lightly against the other woman. It was an accidental touch, nothing more, but it was enough to draw the other woman's attention. The fashionable woman turned sharply, her eyes narrowing. She looked at the pregnant woman, and without giving her a moment to speak or explain, raised her hand and slapped her across the face. The sound echoed in the busy area, drawing the eyes of shoppers and passers-by. People stopped and stared, some gasping in shock. The pregnant woman felt her cheek sting. Her hand went instinctively to her face, and for a moment she couldn't believe what had just happened. Her mind raced, but all she could focus on was her growing baby and the sudden fear that maybe she had hurt the child. She was shaken, but she didn't respond with anger. Instead, she tried to remain calm, hoping to avoid further attention. She whispered an apology, even though she hadn't done anything wrong, slowly stepped back to give space. The woman who had slapped her didn't even pause to hear the apology. She turned on her heel, her expression one of annoyance and superiority. She walked away, clearly satisfied with asserting her power, completely unaware of the fear and pain she had caused. The pregnant woman tried to gather herself, taking deep breaths, feeling her heart pound in her chest. She touched her belly gently, reassuring herself that everything seemed fine with her baby. Though the shock lingered around them, people had begun to murmur, and some had started recording the incident on their phones. A small crowd gathered, curious and concerned. Some people whispered to each other, commenting on how rude and cruel the woman had been, while others shook their heads in disbelief. The pregnant woman, feeling overwhelmed, decided it was best to leave the area before things got more uncomfortable. She moved slowly through the crowd, carefully stepping over the bags and small children in her path, trying to keep herself composed as she walked. She thought about the unpredictability of life and how quickly a normal day could turn into a moment of fear and humiliation. She had always been a kind and gentle person, and she had never imagined that someone could react with such aggression over a minor accident. She tried to push away the fear and focus on her own safety and the well-being of her baby. Each step was careful, deliberate. As she reminded herself to stay strong, the sound of the mall continued around her, the chatter, the laughter, the music playing softly from the stores, but she felt isolated in that moment, as if the world had stopped for just her and the painful memory of the slap. She knew she would remember it for a long time, but she refused to let it define her. She focused on her breathing, taking slow, measured breaths, and reminded herself that kindness and patience were stronger than anger and cruelty. Meanwhile, the woman who had slapped her continued on her way, moving through the crowd without a care. She didn't notice the small glances of disapproval from those around her, or the whispers that followed her as she left the scene. In her mind, she had simply corrected an inconvenience, asserting her dominance in a world she believed belonged to her. She had no idea of the consequences that would come later, the ripple effect of a single moment of thoughtless aggression. The pregnant woman found a quiet corner of the mall, away from the bustling crowd. She sat on a bench, letting herself relax a little, though her heart still raced. She touched her belly again, feeling the gentle movements of her child, and smiled softly despite the fear. It was a small comfort, a reminder that life went on and that she was not alone. She thought about the love and support she had at home, and how she would tell her husband about the incident later, though she hoped it would not cause him worry as she sat there. She noticed a few people who had witnessed the incident giving her sympathetic looks. Some nodded in understanding, while others whispered quietly among themselves. She felt a small wave of gratitude for their silent support. It reminded her that even in moments of cruelty, there were people who cared, who noticed, and who valued decency. She stayed on the bench for some time, watching the people around her, feeling a mixture of anxiety and resilience. She knew she would need to continue with her day, to finish her errands, and to face the outside world again. But for now, she allowed herself this moment of reflection and calm. She took out her phone, checking messages from loved ones, and found a small sense of connection and reassurance. Though the sting of the slap lingered on her cheek, the emotional weight was heavier. She thought about how a single action could change the tone of a day, and how important it was to respond with patience and grace, even when the world seemed unfair. She reminded herself that she could not control the actions of others, but she could control her own responses, her own calm, and the care she gave to herself and her unborn child. The mall continued to buzz around her, the noise and movement a stark contrast to the internal quiet she tried to cultivate. Shoppers moved past, some unaware of the incident, others glancing curiously as they passed. The pregnant woman felt the weight of both vulnerability and strength, a mixture of fear and determination. She knew she had been humiliated, but she also knew she would not let that moment define her spirit. As the afternoon wore on, she slowly rose from the bench, smoothing her dress and taking deliberate steps. She reminded herself to walk with confidence, even after such a shocking moment. Each step was a statement of resilience, a quiet declaration that she would not be broken by someone else's thoughtless anger. She moved forward, determined to finish her errands, to return home safely, and to cherish the life growing inside her. The incident would linger in her memory, but it would also become a story of survival, patience, and quiet strength. She had been tested in an unexpected way, but she had faced it with composure and care, keeping her child safe and her own dignity intact. She knew the day would eventually pass, and that the world was bigger than this single act of cruelty. And so she walked on, navigating the crowd, focusing on the light and love in her life, letting go of the anger that had briefly clouded her afternoon after leaving the bustling mall. The pregnant woman moved carefully toward the parking area. Her hand rested gently on her belly, feeling the soft movement of her child. A quiet reminder of hope and love amid the chaos she had just faced. Her thoughts wandered, trying to understand how someone could react so violently over something so small. The anger and humiliation she felt were still raw, but she focused on breathing slowly, reminding herself to stay calm. She knew that her baby depended on her to remain strong and composed. Meanwhile, the woman who had slapped her continued her afternoon with a sense of satisfaction. She wandered through other stores, occasionally checking her reflection in mirrors, convinced that she had asserted herself in the right way. She didn't notice the glances of disapproval from shoppers or the whispers that followed her. Her world was self-contained, and she believed that no one could challenge her sense of superiority. Little did she know, her small act of cruelty would start a ripple far beyond the mall as the pregnant woman reached her car. She tried to shake off the lingering fear and shock. She sat inside for a few moments, inhaling deeply and listening to the faint hum of the city outside. The sunlight streaming through the windshield felt warm, almost comforting, and she allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection. She thought about the life growing inside her and the love waiting at home. Those thoughts became her shield against the memory of the slap, the moment she stepped out of the car and drove home. Her mind was busy replaying the event, questioning what had happened and why. She wondered if people would remember her as the one who had been humiliated, or if they would see the real story behind the incident. Her thoughts shifted to her husband, a man who was strong, wise, and deeply protective. Though not the type to seek attention, she knew that he would handle the situation with patience and care, and that thought brought her a sense of reassurance. At home, the pregnant woman quietly entered the house, careful not to disturb her husband, who was working in his study. She set down her shopping bags and paused for a moment, trying to gather her courage. Her husband looked up, sensing her unease. Without needing to explain, he came to her side, taking her hand in his and asking gently what had happened. She told him everything, recounting the slap, the humiliation, and the fear she had felt. He listened silently, his expression calm but firm, absorbing every detail. He took a moment before responding, choosing his words carefully. He told her that she had done nothing wrong, and that the other woman's behavior was a reflection of her own character, it's not theirs. He emphasized that they would handle it together, and that she should not feel afraid or guilty. His voice was steady, full of reassurance, and she felt her tension slowly melting away. The presence of someone who cared so deeply gave her the strength to breathe more freely and regain a sense of control. Later that evening, the husband discreetly made inquiries about the woman who had caused the incident. Using careful investigation and reliable sources, he began to understand her background and the life she led. She was someone who had grown accustomed to privilege and influence, unaware of the effects of her actions on ordinary people. He didn't rush to anger or confrontation, knowing that the best response required patience, strategy, and moral clarity. The pregnant woman tried to rest, lying down on the sofa with cushions supporting her back. She closed her eyes and focused on the gentle movements of her child, imagining the future and the kind of life she wanted to nurture. Despite the shock of the day, she felt a renewed determination to protect her peace and the happiness of her family. She realized that while the world could be unfair, love, patience, and careful action could always restore balance. In the following days, the mall incident began to attract attention. A video recorded by a bystander circulated quietly at first, reaching more people through social media. Some viewers expressed outrage, empathizing with the pregnant woman, while others debated the behavior of the woman who had slapped her. Comments ranged from disbelief to anger, but the pregnant woman remained unaware of how widely the incident was spreading. She focused on her home life, her work, and preparing for the new chapter that motherhood would bring. Her husband, observing the spread of the video, decided it was time to take a thoughtful approach. He wanted to ensure that justice was served in a way that was fair and educational, rather than vindictive. He considered the options carefully, weighing the best way to address the situation while protecting his family from unnecessary attention. His approach was deliberate, combining discretion with decisive action, demonstrating the kind of wisdom that came from experience and a deep sense of responsibility. Meanwhile, the woman who had slapped the pregnant woman continued her life without realizing the impact of her actions. She moved through social events, conversations, and errands with her usual confidence, oblivious to the growing whispers about her behavior. Her sense of superiority remained unchallenged, and she believed that the world would continue to revolve around her. But the ripple she had created was starting to reach places she could not control, and soon she would be faced with consequences that were unavoidable. Back at home, the pregnant woman and her husband talked often, planning how to handle any possible encounters or challenges that might arise. They focused on maintaining a peaceful environment for the baby, strengthening their bond, and ensuring that love and kindness remained at the center of their lives. The husband shared small insights with her about human behavior, patience, the importance of responding with intelligence rather than emotion. Each conversation helped her regain confidence and reduce the anxiety that lingered from the slap, even as life continued. The pregnant woman found moments of reflection and gratitude. She spent time reading, taking walks in the nearby park, and enjoying quiet conversations with her husband. These moments allowed her to recover emotionally, turning fear into understanding and anger into calm. She began to see the situation not just as a personal incident, but as a lesson about the unpredictability of human behavior and the strength that could be found in composure. The days passed, and the mall incident became a story that many discussed quietly online. Some people were critical of the woman's behavior, while others debated the reaction and consequences. Yet, for the pregnant woman, these external opinions mattered little. What mattered was her family, her child, and the sense of safety and love that surrounded her. She understood that her dignity was not determined by someone else's cruelty, and she continued to live with that quiet confidence. Her husband continued his quiet, calculated preparation, ensuring that, if the situation escalated, it would be handled with wisdom and impact. He communicated with trusted friends and colleagues, gathering information discreetly and ensuring that any action taken would be measured and effective. He knew that the lesson needed to be both fair and memorable, a reminder to the woman who had caused pain that actions have consequences, even when no one expects them. The pregnant woman felt a growing sense of empowerment, knowing that she was not alone. She learned to navigate her environment with awareness, taking precautions and trusting her instincts. The incident at the mall had been frightening, but it also revealed the depth of support and care that surrounded her. She felt a quiet confidence, a strength that came from patience, understanding, and the love of her family. As the week went on, small signs began to appear that the story was reaching more people. Comments and shares of the video increased, discussions spread, and the pregnant woman's husband monitored the situation carefully. He remained calm, knowing that the right moment would come to address the situation directly. His measured approach reflected the kind of wisdom and foresight that comes from experience, and he was determined to ensure that the outcome would be just and meaningful. The pregnant woman, meanwhile, focused on her daily routine, finding comfort in ordinary activities and in preparing for the arrival of her child. She practiced mindfulness, careful breathing, and simple exercises to stay healthy and strong. She knew that protecting her peace and nurturing her child were the most important things she could do. Each day became an opportunity to grow stronger, wiser, and more resilient. Though the memory of the slap remained, it no longer controlled her emotions. She had learned to transform fear and humiliation into quiet strength, relying on love, patience, and the support of those who cared for her. The incident had been a shock, but it had also revealed the importance of composure, resilience. In careful thought, in the face of unexpected challenges, she knew that life was unpredictable and that people could act in ways that were unfair or cruel. But she also knew that love, patience, and wisdom could create balance and restore dignity. As she prepared for the coming weeks, she felt ready to face whatever challenges might arise, confident in her ability to remain calm, protect her child, and handle each moment with care and intelligence. The story of that afternoon would remain with her, but it would no longer bring fear. It would bring strength, understanding, and a sense of quiet power. Days passed since the mall incident, and the pregnant woman slowly settled back into her daily routine. She moved carefully around the house, preparing meals, organizing baby clothes, and spending quiet moments with her husband. Her mind often wandered back to that afternoon, replaying the sound of the slap and the shock she had felt. But now, instead of fear, she felt a quiet determination. She realized that while she could not control other people's actions, she could control her own response and how she carried herself in the world. Her husband continued to observe the situation closely. He had quietly gathered information about the woman who had slapped his wife. Understanding her background, her social habits, and her sense of entitlement, he discovered that she lived in a world where people often followed her lead without question, where arrogance and impulsiveness were common, and where she rarely considered the impact of her actions on ordinary people. But he didn't act rashly. He believed that careful thought, patience, and strategy were more powerful than anger or confrontation at the same time. The woman who had caused the incident remained unaware of the growing awareness of her behavior. She continued with her social circles, attending events and shopping trips, confident that the world operated according to her will. She had no idea that the video of the slap had begun to circulate quietly on social media, slowly drawing attention and criticism. The ripple of her action was spreading, but she remained blind to it. The pregnant woman focused on her health and the well-being of her child. She walked slowly in nearby parks, taking in the fresh air and sunlight, and spent time reading stories and advice for new parents. Her husband joined her during these walks, offering gentle guidance and sharing wisdom about patience, humility, and kindness. Together, they found small moments of joy and reflection. strengthening their bond and creating a peaceful environment that nurtured both mother and child. One evening, the pregnant woman and her husband discussed the incident in detail. He explained to her how sometimes people act out of selfishness or insecurity, how important it was to respond with calm and integrity. He assured her that the woman who had slapped her would eventually face the consequences of her actions, and that they would handle it thoughtfully. His calm and measured approach comforted her. She felt a renewed sense of trust in him. And in the future, the husband began planning a careful approach to address the situation. He wanted to ensure that the woman who had caused the harm learned a meaningful lesson, without resorting to public shaming or humiliation. He understood that people often only learned from experiences that directly affected them, and he was determined to create an encounter that would make her reflect on her behavior. This plan required patience, timing, and precision, and he approached it with the wisdom of someone who understood human nature deeply. Meanwhile, the woman who had slapped the pregnant woman remained completely unaware of the impending consequences. She continued her routines, attending social gatherings, and moving through life with confidence. Her sense of superiority remained intact, and she believed that nothing could challenge her position or reputation. She laughed with friends, shopped at exclusive stores, and enjoyed the privileges she had always taken for granted. Completely oblivious to the attention her impulsive actions were beginning to attract online. Back at home, the pregnant woman continued to prepare for the arrival of her baby. She decorated the nursery with soft colors, arranged tiny clothes and toys, and carefully read books about childbirth and parenting. Each day, she found a small sense of joy and accomplishment in these preparations, balancing the emotional stress from the incident with nurturing moments for herself and her child. Her husband supported her every step of the way, sharing in her excitement and calming her anxieties. As the days went by, the husband began reaching out discreetly to people who could help in understanding the situation further. Trusted friends and colleagues provided insights about the woman who had caused harm without revealing their plan. The husband analyzed this information carefully, creating a strategy that would allow them to confront the situation effectively and fairly. He was meticulous, knowing that a well-thought-out approach would have a far greater impact than any impulsive reaction. The pregnant woman, while unaware of the details of her husband's planning, continued to grow stronger emotionally. She practiced mindfulness, focusing on her breathing and remaining calm in every situation. She realized that true strength came not from avoiding challenges, but from facing them with patience, grace, and intelligence. Each day, she felt a deeper sense of control over her own emotions and a greater connection to the life growing inside her. Meanwhile, the ripple from the mall incident began to grow. The video circulated among certain social media groups, and more people began discussing it. Some viewers expressed sympathy for the pregnant woman, while others criticized the behavior of the woman who had slapped her. These discussions remained largely online and low-key, but the effect was subtle, yet powerful. The woman who had acted out of arrogance was slowly becoming the subject of quiet scrutiny, even if she remained oblivious to it at home. The pregnant woman and her husband began talking about values, respect, and the way people treated each other. They reflected on the lessons that could be learned from this incident, emphasizing that kindness and understanding were always stronger than cruelty and arrogance. These conversations became part of their daily life, reinforcing the sense of purpose, connection, and love that would guide them through the challenges ahead. The husband carefully coordinated with professionals and friends to ensure that their approach would be fair, effective, and respectful. He wanted to make sure that the woman who had slapped his wife would understand the weight of her actions without being humiliated unnecessarily. He believed that a lesson learned through reflection and awareness would be more powerful and lasting than one forced through anger or punishment. The pregnant woman continued to find comfort in small routines, preparing healthy meals, walking in the park, reading stories, and spending quality time with her husband. She discovered a deeper sense of patience and inner strength, realizing that while the world could be unpredictable and sometimes cruel, her response could create balance and peace. She focused on nurturing herself and her child, understanding that these small acts of care and love would have a profound impact on her life. As the week went on, The couple noticed subtle signs that the ripple effect of the mall incident was spreading. Comments, discussions, and online mentions increased, and their careful observation allowed them to track the growing attention without becoming reactive. The husband remained calm and deliberate, ensuring that their next steps would be taken at the right moment and with the right intention. He believed that timing, wisdom, and strategy were essential to creating a meaningful outcome. The woman who had slapped the pregnant woman remained unaware of the approaching consequences. She continued to live in her bubble of confidence and privilege, moving through social events, shopping trips, and daily routines without concern. She laughed, socialized, and enjoyed her life, completely blind to the fact that her actions were about to be confronted in a meaningful and unforgettable way. Meanwhile, the pregnant woman continued to prepare for her new life as a mother. She spent time organizing the nursery, reading books about parenting, and imagining the joy of holding her child for the first time. Each day, she grew more confident, resilient, and ready to face any challenges that might arise. She knew that love, patience, and careful thought were stronger than fear or anger, and she embraced these qualities fully. Through all of this, the husband's careful planning continued behind the scenes. He coordinated with people he trusted, gathered information, and ensured that every step would be thoughtful and precise. His approach combined wisdom, patience, and strategic insight, creating a plan that would allow the woman who had acted cruelly to face the reality of her actions in a fair and educational way. The goal was not revenge, but understanding, reflection, and accountability. The pregnant woman, while unaware of the detailed planning, remained strong and focused. She practiced mindfulness, spent time in quiet reflection, and nurtured both herself and her child. She knew that the incident at the mall would remain a memory, but it would no longer control her life. Instead, it became a story of resilience, growth, and the power of calm and thoughtful action. She was determined to continue living with dignity, patience, and love, no matter what challenges came next. As the days turned into weeks, the pregnant woman and her husband grew closer. Their bond strengthened by shared experiences, mutual respect, and careful planning. They continued to focus on their home, their future child, and the importance of responding to challenges with intelligence and care. Each conversation, each small action, reinforced their sense of purpose and their ability to face whatever came next with confidence and grace. The story of the mall incident was quietly growing in the background, spreading through social media and conversations. Yet, the pregnant woman and her husband remained grounded, focused on what truly mattered: love, patience, and the well-being of their family. The husband's careful strategy continued to take shape, preparing for a moment when the consequences of the woman's actions would be revealed in a meaningful and unforgettable way. Through all of this, the pregnant woman discovered her own strength. She realized that challenges could be met with calm, reflection, and wisdom, and that true power came from inner peace and thoughtful action. She embraced this understanding fully, preparing herself emotionally and mentally for the days ahead, knowing that she and her family were ready to face any challenge with grace and dignity. The day of the planned encounter arrived, and the pregnant woman and her husband prepared for the event carefully. The husband had arranged a gathering under the guise of a charity event, a subtle and socially acceptable setting where the confrontation could happen naturally without unnecessary attention. The couple spent the morning ensuring everything was in order, the pregnant woman moving slowly but with determination, while her husband coordinated quietly with the staff and organizers. As they arrived at the event, the atmosphere was warm and inviting, filled with soft music and chatter. People moved gracefully between exhibits and displays, enjoying the charity event and socializing in a relaxed manner. The pregnant woman felt a mixture of anticipation and calm. She understood that the moment would soon come, but she focused on remaining composed and protecting the peace she had nurtured over the past weeks. The woman who had slapped her entered the venue unaware of the plan. She moved confidently through the crowd, chatting with friends and laughing, completely oblivious to the significance of her surroundings. She had no idea that the person she had humiliated weeks ago was here, nor that the husband was present, carefully observing her every move. She continued her social interactions as if nothing had happened, her confidence intact, her sense of superiority undiminished. The husband stayed close to his wife, subtly guiding her through the event and positioning her in such a way that the encounter would happen naturally. He had thought carefully about every detail, understanding that confrontation could be powerful if done with intelligence and composure rather than anger. He knew that the lesson needed to be memorable, fair, and instructive. The pregnant woman's heart raced slightly as she spotted the woman approaching, chatting with a group of acquaintances. She felt a surge of emotions, fear, anticipation, and a quiet sense of justice. Her husband gently squeezed her hand, a reminder that she was not alone and that everything would be handled with care. His calm presence was grounding, and she took a deep breath. Focusing on staying composed, the woman who had slapped her finally noticed her across the room. There was a brief moment of confusion in her expression, a flicker of recognition that quickly passed. She did not immediately understand why she felt uneasy, but a subtle shift in the atmosphere caught her attention. She began to sense that something was different, that this meeting was not accidental. Her friends noticed her hesitation, but she waved it off, still unaware of the full reality. The husband made his move carefully, approaching the woman with a calm and authoritative presence. He introduced himself politely, engaging her in conversation while maintaining control of the situation. His demeanor was firm but respectful, a subtle assertion of power without aggression. He guided the discussion toward the recent incident at the mall, allowing the woman to slowly realize the significance of her actions and the person she had harmed. The pregnant woman stayed slightly behind her husband, observing the interaction. She felt a mix of curiosity and relief, knowing that the situation was unfolding as planned. She could see the recognition in the woman's eyes growing clearer, along with the sudden awareness that her behavior had real consequences. There was no need for harsh words or public humiliation. The calm, deliberate approach of the husband made the lesson undeniable and impactful. As the conversation continued, the woman who had slapped her began to understand the depth of her actions. She realized that the person she had humiliated was not just an ordinary individual, but someone deeply connected and valued by those around her. The husband's composed but firm explanation allowed her to feel the weight of her mistake without fear or shame, creating a moment of reflection and self-awareness that would leave a lasting impression. The pregnant woman stepped forward at the appropriate moment, her calm presence adding gravity to the situation. The woman who had slapped her finally connected the dots, understanding fully who she was and the reality of the encounter. Shock and regret replaced the arrogance that had once filled her expression. She realized that her impulsive action had consequences beyond her control, and that humility and reflection were now necessary. The husband guided the conversation gently, emphasizing the importance of respect, empathy, and thoughtful behavior. He allowed the woman to reflect on her actions and recognize the impact she had caused. The pregnant woman observed silently, her own sense of dignity intact, feeling the power of quiet resilience and the strength that came from maintaining composure in the face of injustice. The woman who had caused harm eventually apologized sincerely, her tone filled with genuine remorse. She acknowledged the mistake she had made, the pain she had caused, and the arrogance that had led to her behavior. The pregnant woman accepted the apology graciously, demonstrating the power of forgiveness and the strength of a kind heart. The atmosphere shifted from tension to understanding, from conflict to resolution. The husband concluded the encounter with a reminder of the importance of awareness and responsibility in all interactions. His words were measured and impactful, leaving the woman with a sense of reflection and the understanding that actions always carry consequences. The pregnant woman felt a deep sense of satisfaction, knowing that the situation had been resolved without anger, humiliation, or unnecessary conflict. The event continued, with the pregnant woman and her husband moving gracefully through the crowd, maintaining composure and dignity. The woman who had slapped her lingered for a moment, still absorbing the lesson before retreating quietly. The ripple of the encounter would remain with her, a reminder of humility, empathy, and the importance of considering others. Later, as the pregnant woman and her husband left the venue, They reflected on the events of the day. They discussed the power of calm, thoughtful action, the importance of strategic planning, and the strength that comes from maintaining dignity in the face of conflict. They recognized that the incident, once a source of fear and humiliation, had become a powerful lesson for all involved, teaching resilience, patience, and empathy. The pregnant woman felt a sense of relief and empowerment. She realized that the encounter had been handled perfectly, with care, intelligence, and humanity. She understood that she had not only protected herself and her child, but had also facilitated a meaningful lesson for someone else. The experience reinforced her sense of inner strength and her ability to navigate difficult situations with grace and composure. As they returned home, the couple continued to discuss the importance of empathy, respect, and thoughtful responses to conflict. They shared quiet moments of reflection, understanding that the events of the day were a turning point. The pregnant woman felt a renewed sense of confidence, knowing that she had faced adversity and emerged with dignity intact. She knew that her child would grow up in a world where love, patience, and wisdom were valued above all else. The woman who had slapped her would carry the lesson of the encounter with her, a reminder of the power of actions and the importance of humility. The pregnant woman, strengthened by the experience, continued to focus on her family, her health, and the coming chapters of her life. She had faced a moment of cruelty and emerged stronger, a wiser and more compassionate, embodying the quiet power of resilience and thoughtful action. The day ended with a sense of closure and peace. The pregnant woman and her husband returned home, holding on to the lessons learned and the bond strengthened. They had navigated a challenging situation with intelligence, patience, and empathy, creating a resolution that was fair, meaningful, and transformative. The story of the mall incident, once a source of fear and humiliation, had become a testament to the power of calm, human-centered action, and the enduring strength of love and dignity. The days after the event passed quietly, yet with a sense of change in the air. The pregnant woman and her husband settled back into their home life, carrying with them the lessons and reflections from the confrontation. The pregnant woman felt lighter, as if a weight had been lifted off her shoulders. She moved through her daily routine with renewed confidence, finding joy in preparing for her baby, organizing the nursery, and spending quiet moments with her husband. Each day was a reminder that life could be unpredictable, but inner strength, patience, and thoughtful action could turn challenges into opportunities for growth. The woman who had slapped her remained deeply affected by the encounter. She spent time reflecting on her actions, the embarrassment she had felt, and the realization of how her arrogance had caused harm. She began to understand the importance of empathy, humility, and considering the impact of her behavior on others. Her interactions with friends and colleagues changed subtly, her tone gentler, and her attitude more considerate. The lesson had been learned, not through punishment, but through awareness and reflection, which proved far more meaningful and lasting. The pregnant woman continued to focus on her health and the well-being of her child. She walked in the park, enjoying the sunlight and fresh air, and spent time preparing meals and reading stories about parenthood. Each small action was a step toward creating a peaceful and loving environment for her child. She felt empowered, knowing that she had faced adversity and emerged stronger with her dignity intact. Her husband's support remained constant, his calm presence reinforcing her sense of security and confidence. Together, they discussed values, the importance of respect, and the power of thoughtful responses to conflict. They reflected on how moments of injustice could become lessons if handled with patience and intelligence. The pregnant woman realized that the incident had not defined her life, but had instead strengthened her character. She felt a deep sense of gratitude for the wisdom, guidance, and love she shared with her husband, and for the resilience she had discovered within herself. The woman who had acted cruelly began to notice subtle changes in how others interacted with her. She realized that respect and kindness were earned, not demanded, and that her previous behavior had created barriers rather than opportunities for connection. She approached her social interactions with more awareness, listening more carefully, and speaking with thoughtfulness. The encounter had transformed her understanding of human relationships, showing her that humility and empathy were essential qualities that could not be overlooked. The pregnant woman and her husband also reflected on the broader lessons of the experience. They recognized that life was filled with unexpected challenges, and that true strength came from responding thoughtfully rather than reacting impulsively. They discussed how their approach had been guided by calmness, intelligence, and care, and how these qualities had allowed them to resolve a difficult situation in a way that was fair, educational, and transformative. As the pregnancy progressed, the couple continued to focus on creating a nurturing environment. They prepared the nursery with love, choosing colors and decorations that reflected warmth and comfort. They organized baby clothes and toys with care, each small detail a testament to their anticipation and excitement. The pregnant woman found joy in these preparations, feeling a growing connection to her child and a sense of empowerment in shaping a positive environment for the future. The woman who had previously caused harm continued to reflect on the lessons she had learned. She found herself reconsidering past behaviors and interactions, recognizing moments where she could have shown more empathy and understanding. These reflections gradually changed her approach to life, leading her to become more mindful and considerate in her daily actions. She realized that the encounter had been a turning point, a moment of awareness that would influence her future behavior in meaningful ways. The pregnant woman and her husband also shared quiet moments of reflection, discussing the importance of integrity, patience, and empathy. They talked about how life's challenges could be met with calm, thoughtful action, and how these qualities could create balance and peace even in difficult situations. The pregnant woman felt a deep sense of satisfaction in knowing that the incident had been resolved without anger or humiliation, and that the outcome had been a lesson in humanity and respect. The couple continued their daily routines, finding joy in ordinary moments. They walked together in the park, shared meals, and prepared for the arrival of their child. Each day brought a sense of anticipation and hope, reinforcing the importance of love, patience, and careful action. The pregnant woman felt empowered, knowing that she had faced a moment of injustice and had navigated it with dignity, strength, and grace. The woman who had slapped her also began to make small changes in her life. She approached social interactions with more mindfulness, considering the feelings of others and reflecting on the impact of her behavior. She recognized that true respect could not be demanded, but had to be earned through kindness, humility, and thoughtful action. The encounter had provided her with a profound lesson, one that would shape her future behavior and interactions in meaningful ways. The pregnant woman and her husband also took time to discuss their hopes for the future. They talked about the kind of values they wanted to instill in their child, emphasizing the importance of empathy, patience, and resilience. They reflected on the lessons of the past weeks, understanding that challenges could be transformed into opportunities for growth and learning. The pregnant woman felt a deep sense of purpose and confidence, knowing that she had the strength to face any situation with grace and composure. As the weeks went by, the pregnant woman continued to prepare for the arrival of her baby. She organized the nursery, read books about parenting, and spent quiet moments reflecting on the journey ahead. Her husband remained a steady source of support, offering guidance, encouragement, and reassurance. Together, they created a loving and peaceful environment, focused on nurturing both themselves and their future child. The woman who had previously caused harm also continued to evolve. She became more thoughtful in her interactions, showing consideration and empathy in ways she had not before. The encounter at the charity event had left a lasting impression, teaching her that actions had consequences and that respect and humility were essential qualities in any relationship. She approached life with a renewed sense of awareness, determined to live more responsibly and kindly. The pregnant woman felt a sense of closure and peace. She had faced a challenging situation, endured a moment of humiliation, and emerged stronger, wiser, and more compassionate. She realized that her strength had come from patience, resilience, and the support of her husband. She had turned a difficult experience into a lesson in dignity and humanity, and she carried that understanding with her into the next chapter of her life. As the final weeks of pregnancy approached, the couple focused on creating lasting memories, enjoying quiet walks, sharing meals, and preparing for the arrival of their child. Each day reinforced the values of empathy, patience, and thoughtful action. The pregnant woman felt empowered, knowing that she had navigated a challenging situation with grace, and that she was ready to face the joys and challenges of motherhood with confidence and love. A woman who had caused harm continued to reflect and grow. Understanding the importance of humility and empathy in her interactions, the encounter had been transformative, teaching her a powerful lesson about human behavior and the impact of her actions. She began to approach life with greater awareness. Understanding that kindness and thoughtfulness were far more valuable than arrogance or impulsive behavior, the pregnant woman and her husband continued to share quiet moments of reflection, discussing the lessons learned and the values they wished to instill in their child. They understood that life was unpredictable, but that thoughtful, compassionate action could create balance, peace, and growth. The pregnant woman felt a profound sense of satisfaction, knowing that she had faced adversity and emerged with her dignity and strength intact. The story concluded with a sense of harmony, closure, and growth. The pregnant woman and her husband had navigated a challenging situation with patience, intelligence, and care, turning a moment of cruelty into an opportunity for reflection and learning. The woman who had acted impulsively had gained insight into her behavior and its consequences, while the pregnant woman had discovered her own strength, resilience, and capacity for grace. As the pregnant woman prepared for the arrival of her child, she carried with her the lessons of patience, empathy, and thoughtful action. She knew that life would continue to present challenges, but she felt ready to face them with dignity, love, and strength. The experience had taught her that true power came not from reacting with anger or revenge, but from remaining calm, composed, and compassionate in the end. The story was not just about a moment of conflict, but about growth, understanding, and the transformative power of patience and empathy. The pregnant woman had faced adversity and emerged stronger. The woman who had acted cruelly had learned the importance of humility, and the husband had demonstrated the power of thoughtful, human-centered action. Together, these experiences created a lasting lesson in resilience, compassion, and the strength of the human spirit, setting the stage for a new chapter filled with hope, love, and the promise of a brighter future.